Good afternoon. I'm Laura Bleacher from NASA's Office of Communications. Thank you for joining us for today's pre-launch news conference for Northrop Grumman's 18th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station. The Antares rocket with the Cygnus spacecraft atop is targeted for liftoff tomorrow, Sunday, November 6th, from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport's Pad A at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility on Wallops Island. A 5-minute launch window will open at 5:50 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Northrop Grumman is scheduled to deliver more than 8,200 pounds of cargo to the orbiting laboratory, including critical supplies to directly support dozens of the more than 250 science and research investigations that will occur during Expedition 68. Here to talk with us about the mission and tomorrow's launch are Joel Montalbano, International Space Station Program Manager; Heidi Paris, Associate Program Scientist for the International Space Station; Steve Krein, Vice President, Civil and Commercial Space, Northrop Grumman; Kurt Eberly, Director, Space Launch Programs, Northrop Grumman; Ted Mercer, CEO and Executive Director, Virginia Commercial Spaceflight Authority; and Jeff Reddish, Wallops Range Chief. Our speakers will each provide opening remarks, then we'll move to questions from reporters in the room, on the phone, and via hashtag AskNASA on social media. To enter the question queue on the phone, please use *1. To start, we'll hear from Joel Montalbano, International Space Station Program Manager. Joel?
Hey, thank you, Laura. It is great to be back here. You know, it's been 2.5 years since we've had a Northrop Grumman Cygnus discussion here in this room. So to see your smiling faces and then to do it on the eve of a launch is especially more exciting. So thank you guys for being here. We're excited, just like you are, to have another mission to the International Space Station. Yesterday, we completed the Launch Readiness Review. The Launch Readiness Review is the final management meeting where we review all the items ready for launch. You can tell by the fact that we lasted on about an hour and a half or so, but all the work that was done to get us ready for this mission, it was clear that the teams are ready. At the end of the meeting, the team pulled go, and we're preparing for the launch tomorrow morning. Speaking about launch tomorrow morning, so to give you some times, 5:50 Eastern time. So that's after the time change. So don't forget the time change, 5:50 Eastern. About 48 hours later, we'll have a capture of the vehicle by astronaut Nicole Mann. So 48 hours early Monday morning. And we'll have to do the berthing activities, some leak checks, and we expect to get the hatch open just after 1 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. This vehicle will be carrying approximately 8,200 pounds of hardware, including the support structure for the third set of new solar arrays that we're augmenting on board the International Space Station, a number of utilization and research hardware items that Heidi will talk to you about, some technology demonstration hardware that we need for exploration, as well as some low Earth orbit commercialization hardware. As I said, Nicole will be primed for capture. Josh will be her backup. Looking forward after this, we have a spacewalk. We have 3 spacewalks, 3 U.S. spacewalks remaining for the end of the year. The first of those 3 will be November 15th with Josh and Frank going outside. And Monday at 2 p.m. is that Eastern, I believe we'll have the press brief for those EVAs. This vehicle will stay berthed for approximately 3 months. So we're looking at early January where we go ahead and release that vehicle. As far as the preparations, the team's ready to go. I want to give a huge thanks to the Northrop Grumman team, the Virginia Space team, the Wallops team, and the ISS team, the international partners. We are ready for this mission. We're excited to have this mission. And with that, I'll hand it over to Heidi.
All right. Thanks, Joel. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. I get the privilege of talking with you just a little bit about our research program on board the International Space Station, and especially some of the research that's launching on the NG-18 vehicle this weekend. So this is a very exciting time for research on board the International Space Station. Every new vehicle that launches is bringing up not only new research, but also additional capabilities that help us expand both the variety and the depth of research that we're able to support on board the space station. And our research team, our research community is really taking advantage of those opportunities in order to study their science in a new way, a way they can only study in an orbiting laboratory like the International Space Station. To date, we've had well over about 3,000 different investigations done on board the station. Each of those investigations is teaching us something about how to improve our lives on Earth, as well as how to not only survive, but to thrive as we continue to explore further into space. And it's exciting to realize that each of these new investigations that comes up brings with it the possibility of discoveries that can impact our lives in big ways. One of the very recent unexpected discoveries we had on board the International Space Station was with the EMIT investigation. So the primary goal of this investigation is to map the composition of the Earth's mineral dust sources. But in the very few months that it's been taking data, this research team has realized that in addition to its primary goal, it can also be used to detect super emitters of methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. So this finding opens up a whole new avenue for us to explore to help understand how the Earth's ecosystem is changing over time and how those changes are dependent on each other. So I want to talk now a little bit about the research coming up on NG-18. We have hardware and samples that are supporting right around 40 different investigations. About half of those are brand new on this flight. I do have a quick video I want to show that gives just a few highlights of the research that will be coming up on NG-18. All right, so you can see lots of great research coming up on NG-18. As I was looking over the whole complement of research on this flight, a couple of things jumped out at me. First one is that there are a lot of firsts in terms of research on this flight. So the first attempt to categorize the very unique dynamics involved with catastrophic mud flows. One of the first studies to look into how microgravity impacts ovarian function. Also, as a part of the BIRDS 5 project, these are going to be the first satellites built and designed by the countries of Uganda and Zimbabwe. And that's data that will be provided to them that will be useful, that they would not normally have access to, but it also provides a foundation to build future spaceflight activities off of. And the second thing I noticed is that we have a lot of investigations that are building upon past successes and past results in the field in order to expand that area of research. So biofabrication facility is one example. This has flown before. It'll be flying a second time on NG-18, and they have modified and enhanced the capabilities of this facility in order to be able to enhance what it's able to do on orbit. Also, we have Plant Habitat 03, which is taking advantage of previous studies into plant epigenetics in order to understand how plants adapt in a second generation of spaceflight. The last thing I wanted to mention, which is what these pictures cover, is one of our longest running educational activities on board the International Space Station. It's called Sally Ride EarthCam. EarthCam stands for Earth Knowledge Acquired by Middle School Students. So, of course, this flight is named in honor of Sally Ride, which I think Steve will talk a bit more about in a minute. But she was instrumental in spearheading this investigation and making it a reality from even the beginning of the ISS program. So this investigation teaches students about geography and weather patterns and spacecraft orbits. And then they use that knowledge to take pictures of specific regions on Earth using a camera that's mounted on board the International Space Station. Very impactful investigation. They've had well over 1 million students participate since the beginning of that program. So like I said, lots of great stuff coming up on NG-18. We are very excited to get started and excited to see what discoveries come out of this research. Steve, over to you.
Well, great. Thanks, Heidi. And just wanted to echo Joel's sentiments. It's great to be back here at Wallops. It's been a long time, and it's really exciting to be back. On behalf of Northrop Grumman, I'd like to welcome you all to the NG-18 launch. Excited for tomorrow. I just want to thank our mission partners, NASA, Virginia Space, and all the folks at Wallops Flight Facility for all the hard work that's going into making tomorrow a highly successful mission. And also, very special thanks to all the Northrop Grumman folks out there and the ones on the pad working the final 8 load, which is now complete, and of course, the preparations for tomorrow's successful mission execution and implementation. This will be, NG-18 will be our 18th cargo resupply mission in 2011. Again, a great success record there with a highly reliable Cygnus vehicle. This is an interesting configuration. The NG-18 launch vehicle being the same mass-optimized configuration. A lot of the secondary structure and peripherals have been removed to maximize the cargo load and also the fuel load to really get the maximum complement of supplies, science experiments, and equipment to the space station. I think we're at 8,265 pounds, if I'm not mistaken, which is 1 pound of margin. So we really topped it off. And also we will be maximizing the fuel load to really allow for contingencies as required and also for operational maneuvers on station to support our mission should the customer choose to exercise that. Cygnus is also, as you know, a multi-function vehicle. As Heidi mentioned, a lot of science on there. Also in addition to the cargo, it's a great time this time of year for fall cleaning. And at the end, we'll be disposing of trash, of course, before re-entry at the end of the mission timeline. Also, we mentioned the late load is now complete, which is exciting. And this late load capability is really instrumental in getting time-sensitive materials to station and also in providing astronauts perishable foods such as fresh fruit and the special treat on this mission, popsicles, which is exciting. Hopefully it's a rainbow assortment so everyone gets their favorite flavor, but we'll leave that to the folks. Kurt's going to speak here just momentarily, but we're just incredibly proud of the work that's gone in from Northrop Grumman to get where we are today. And I'll just give a quick view. I know Joel touched on it before, but the mission timeline should be really straightforward this time. Liftoff will give us a perfect insertion, of course, from Antares. About 9 minutes after liftoff, we'll separate. We'll do some comm acquisitions and some burns to make sure the orbit's correct. And then really the big milestone will be about 3 hours after launch. We'll be deploying the solar arrays, multi-stage deployment. It'll take about half an hour. Then we'll have full power in the vehicle. Do some burns to get to the 4-kilometer point below the station. The following day, we'll do additional burns to get to the 30-meter acquisition point, as Joel mentioned. Do the robotic arm grapple, berthing operations, and ingress as shortly as we can thereafter. So that'll really finish the initial phase of the mission, then on to unload, trash load, and then also disposals we talked about. As Heidi mentioned, we are just incredibly excited. It's a tradition at Northrop to name each mission after someone that's really made a huge contribution to human spaceflight and exploration, and this mission will be named after Dr. Sally Ride, as you've all heard. Sally was really a true space pioneer and also a tireless advocate for improving STEM literacy for children, especially young girls. And I'm just going to give a quick overview. She had such a storied career, but I'll just hit some highlights. In 1978, Dr. Ride became one of 38 astronaut candidates selected from more than 8,000 folks to join NASA astronaut cadre number 8. She served as the first female Capcom, the astronaut that talks to the astronauts' orbit in their spacecraft, another first for her again. In 1983, she flew on SDS-7, the Space Shuttle Challenger's second mission, and then she flew in 1984 on the SDS-41G mission. After retirement, Dr. Ride and her partner Tam O'Shaughnessy founded the Sally Ride Science Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at improving STEM literacy for children. And she's really been an inspiration for millions. And I'll just share a quick story. When we announced the naming, I actually was in the room with Joel down at Johnson Space Center. And there were a number of senior female engineers, deputy program manager, other folks in the room. And to see their faces when we announced it, number one, and then they shared stories about when they were growing up that they had posters of Dr. Ride in their bedrooms as an inspiration. So just to see how that resonated with the team, number one, and to show the enormous amount of respect at the professional level and all the people she inspired is really a great testament to her legacy. And of course, finally, Dr. Ride was posthumously the recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2013, and she is just a true American hero, and we couldn't be prouder to name this mission after her. I've got one final note before we go to the video, kind of a heartwarming public interest story. There's a elementary school in South Los Angeles, the Sally Ride Elementary School, which was unanimously named via a vote in the community. And they have given us a flag, which I think was up on the screen just a moment ago. And a certificate with the flag was signed by 402 of the students and staff. And although we were really tight on the mass load, as I mentioned before, we were able to get the flag on the vehicle, and it'll be going up and then returning shortly thereafter. So we are incredibly excited to make that happen for the team. And I'd like to just give a shout out to the students at Sally Ride Elementary School, known as the Mighty Astronauts, by the way, which is pretty neat. And have them reach for the stars. And again, their accomplishments will just be an additional contribution to Sally's legacy as they progress through their careers. So again, we are incredibly proud of Northrop Grumman for this launch, and I'd like to maybe turn your attention to a quick video of how we're going to execute this successfully tomorrow morning at 0800.
Northrop Grumman is go. Copy, and we are go to proceed with final countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We have ignition.
We have ignition start.
We have liftoff. Go Antares, go Cygnus. And we have payload separate. The launch team reports successful.
All right. Hello, everybody. Kurt Everly here, Space Launch Director. And I really like that video because it really highlights the employees that are behind this system and the employees that produce the hardware for the launch vehicle back in Chandler, Arizona, largely, and then on the spacecraft side in Dulles, Virginia. And so those are the people that really, deliver the hardware that the folks here locally at Wallops get to put together. So, and we were actually able to get some of them to come out and see the launch this time, folks that are not really part of the program, but they are producing the parts and minding the store and keeping the doors open. So we're really happy to have them here to see the launch. So welcome, you guys. All right. So first of all, back last launch was NG-17 in February. Everything went really well. Post-launch data review was right on the money. That was the 6th launch of the 230 Plus configuration of Antares, which we developed specifically to meet the needs of the CRS-2 contract. And so what are those needs? We offered some upgrades for 230 Plus. The first was more mass to orbit, so we upsized the ability to carry cargo. The second was the 24-hour final cargo load, which happened just this morning. You saw the pictures of how we do that with the mobile clean room over the front of the rocket while it's down horizontal. So that's really key for NASA to be able to load a lot of cargo into Cygnus right there 24 hours before liftoff. The final thing is cargo mass flexibility. So let's say an experiment doesn't go well or something has to be pulled off. They can do that at the 24-hour mark, and then we just we update the amount of mass on board, and then our guidance is able to adapt to that and get us to the right location anyway. So for NG-18, we've also made some improvements, and we've increased the mass to orbit by 70 kilograms from 8,050 to 8,120. Which has allowed us to carry a little more cargo, about 20 kilograms more cargo for NASA. And obviously, they're taking full advantage of that by making us completely full here. That's great. And so this will be the 7th launch of the 230 Plus configuration on CRS-2. It's been a really smooth integration flow so far, and things are going really well. Beautiful weather. Thank you for that, Jeff. And so I would like to thank our Virginia space partners who manage the spaceport. It's not easy to keep a complicated facility working right next to a salt ocean, and to Jeff and his range team for providing the range support that we rely on for these launches. So just a quick recap of the last week. On Tuesday, we had the dress rehearsal where we tortured the launch team with green cards and off-nominal situations just to make sure they can work through it. On Wednesday, we rolled the vehicle out to the pad and we went vertical. The next day, on Thursday, we do our combined systems test. We turn on all the systems and make sure everything's working well and all the communication links back to the range are good. After that, we went back down horizontal Thursday night, and really Friday was a margin day in case we had weather or other issues. And so that brought us to this morning where the late load was, or the final load was at 5:50 a.m. All right, so tomorrow morning, or late tonight, after we will go vertical around midday this afternoon, we will connect all the commodity lines back up, we'll do some leak checks, and then we'll do final arming. Our teams will report on console 5.5 hours before L0, and L0 is 5:50 a.m. and 16 seconds. That's the open of a 5-minute window. Target the opening of the window. Now, we will start the countdown on daylight savings time, and we will launch on standard time. And so my team has been wondering what time do I need to wake up and get to. So we've ordered the launch team to actually sleep on console, so there's not going to be any confusion. So that's our solution. It's going to work really well. All right. Once we lift off, it's a quick 9 minutes to orbit, and then we'll separate Cygnus, and then Steve's teams take over. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ted Mercer from Virginia Space.
Thank you very much, Kurt. But before I get into these comments, I got to ask a question. You can't just sit there and not participate. So I got to ask a question of you. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel that excitement? Let me see the hands, the excitement that's exuding from this panel. Can you feel it? Absolutely. We're loving it. The excitement and the adrenaline is pumping, ladies and gentlemen, and we're looking forward to 0550 tomorrow morning. So you've heard in the comments earlier from my colleagues about the business end of this mission. You've heard about the rocket. You've heard about Cygnus. You've heard about the payload, the experiments, the science that's going to go up to the space station. That's all the business end of this. But how do you get it there? That's where we come in, right? You got to have a spaceport to get it there. And that's who we are. Where you can liken us to what you might imagine an airport, right? When airlines fly into an airport, That airport is there to support them getting in and getting out and getting you passengers where you need to go safely. That's what we do. Only we do it from the perspective of putting satellites in orbit and launching rockets. So that's who we are. We're only 2 spaceports that resupply the International Space Station. Only 2. It's us and the Cape. That's it. So I like to say that I know our astronaut brethren like the fact that we're here doing that, because when they run out of supplies, they can't run to the corner 7-Eleven and replenish. That's up to us to do it. Our partnership with Northrop Grumman, NASA, with our public-private partnerships, are key to the success of this model for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport. We are a unique spaceport in that way. No other model in the United States out of the other 4 major spaceports, and all spaceports are not the same, out of the 4 major spaceports, that model is unique. But it's through that partnership that allows it to work and work so effectively. You've heard a lot about the importance of assured access to space for this nation, not just the Commonwealth, for this nation. We're critical to that. Remember that there are only 4 spaceports in the United States that can do vertical lift to orbit for tens of thousands of pounds. It's only 4. We guarantee assured access to space for the nation in what we do. We're also an economic engine. The partnerships that we provide, the additional capability that comes to launch from Mars, brings with it business opportunities and economic growth for the region. That's what the Commonwealth wants us doing. So all of that combined is what allows us to support all of the business end that you've heard about already. I'll conclude with go NG-18, go Cygnus. Jeff, over to you.
Well, I'm very excited. I think I'm almost finished with that. Well, welcome to Wallops. Welcome to this great afternoon. Kurt, I did put this reservation in for this week for this weather, so you're welcome. No problem. The weather is part of our range, so we certainly put these forecasts in and make that happen. But from a range standpoint, we are very ready to launch. We control all the systems, the tracking, the telemetry, and the command systems here at Wallops. We have a downrange base in Bermuda, so that's our downrange site. We've tested between Bermuda and Wallops. We tested between Bermuda, Wallops, and the vehicle. All testing went very well. Of course, you have a few hiccups here and there that you got to work out, and we've done that extremely well. We've tested multiple days over the last several weeks. We've been very busy on the range for months. When cargo came in, we support a very broad diversity of things that happen on the range for NG and Mars, and I'm very excited that we get this opportunity with Mars and Northrop Grumman to do that, to support our nation. And one trivia question I'll also add with what Tid was referring to was NASA, the only owned NASA space launch facility is Wallops. So that's a trivia question I don't think many people know, but the only NASA-owned space facility is right here at Wallops. So we are we work with Ted and his group here with Mars and Northrop Grumman, and we just enjoy the work, and we're very excited to do it. So as I said, the range is ready. We've frozen configuration going into tomorrow or tonight into tomorrow. We're opening up our count. We come in early. We're opening up our count tonight around 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we'll be counting through the night. So all looks good for a great launch. We've put the reservations and confirmed reservations for all of our hazard areas. All our op areas are good to go. So about L-9:30 we open our count. NG gets on console about L-4:30, somewhere around there. So we put in multiple hours getting our range together so that we can support NG when they come on console and turn their vehicle on. All our support goes to them. So we come in very early to certify and ensure our systems are ready. Lastly, the weather. Let's look at the weather. This is the most exciting part. You can't get any better than this weather right now. The beautiful eastern shore of Virginia with the fall leaves, and we've got this Indian summer going on. I don't think the weather can get any better. But looking here, our weather office is right down the hall from me. So I go down to the weather office every day, and it's kind of a love-hate relationship because I want to go in and help them forecast, and they kick me out of the office pretty quickly. So today, it's kind of ironic. I get to give the forecast, and they're not here. So anyway, can you put that slide back up, please? The weather is great. We've got an 80% chance of launching. If you look at this, chart, it says probability of violation of 20%. Well, that's another argument I have with weather. I said, why don't you have the probability of a successful launch or having a launch of 80%? That sounds a lot better than a violation of 20%. So we have a probability of 80% to make this launch. The only concern is with the weather, as seasons change here on the eastern shore, we have the hot and cold mixture, and we have a lot of low clouds before the sun comes up. So one of our concerns is that the fog. I don't know if you guys were up earlier, but you see a lot of fog out there. So we're a little concerned with the fog, but hopefully that'll, with a little bit of breeze and some help from Mother Nature, we'll be able to clear our paths up and be able to launch this thing. So with that said, I'm done. The range is go. We're go Antares, go Cygnus. We're excited and ready for this launch. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Now we'll take your questions. For those of you in the room, please raise your hand to be handed a microphone. We'll also take questions from reporters on the phone and via hashtag AskNASA on social media. To enter into the question queue on the phone, please use *1.
Jeff Faust of Space News. 2 questions for Kurt. This is the first Antares launch since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How has that affected the launch preparations for this mission? And 2, you mentioned you've got a little extra payload performance, mass to orbit on this, I think you said 70 kilograms. What did you do to get that additional payload capacity?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, really things have been unchanged. You know, we do all the work on all the hardware, all of our techs here, and we had all the hardware here prior to the launch of NG-17 for NG-18 and NG-19 missions. So really it's been unaffected. We've been in communication with our suppliers, and it's been situation normal for the processing. With regard to the 70 kilograms, we didn't actually change any hardware. What we did was we took the 6 flights of data that we had accumulated, and we refined the models of the propulsion performance for stage 1 and stage 2, and we took some of the conservatism out, and now that we had all that flight data to look at. And so by taking that conservatism out, we aimed a little higher, and were able to offer a little bit more performance, and we were able to offer that back when we bid on the 2 missions here. The 2 missions being NG-18 and 19.
Yes, my name is Brent Houston from Tacoma Voice. This question is for Mr. Eberly, talking about mass to orbit, thinking of Ares 330. I was reading about that the other day, about the after the 8th launch goes in the spring for Ares 230. I was reading that that will be nearly twice as powerful as the current 230 iteration, which means you'll need more propellant, which means you'll need a bigger HIF, which means a lot of things, and plus mass to orbit.
I think you're referring to the Antares 330. Yeah, the Antares 330, yes. Yes, so it's really excited about the development project we've announced just this past August, which is to develop a new first stage, a domestically sourced first stage from Firefly Aerospace, which is a company headquartered in Texas. You may know them because they launched a small rocket called Alpha, and they just had a successful second flight of Alpha that made it to orbit recently. So we have struck an agreement with them. We are going to partner on developing a new first stage, and you're right, it's bigger than the current first stage, and that's going to give us more capability, but it's not quite double. We're going to go from around, I said about 8,100 kilograms now mass to orbit. We're going to go up to 10,500 kilograms. And the way we're going to do that, the first stage is going to be a little longer, but it's also going to be bigger and bigger diameter, and it's going to have rocket engines that they are going to develop for us underneath it, 7 Miranda rocket engines. your comment about the HIF, we took into account the size of the HIF, and we made sure that we stayed within the physical limitations of the HIF, and then we also have some constraints out at the pad on the rocket fitting within the system that pushes the vehicle up to vertical, and we wanted to make sure that we fit within those key pieces of infrastructure because they're really long lead and they were hard to develop in the first place back in the early 2010s timeframe. So yeah, we're really excited about that partnership. That's slated to debut to be ready to launch in late 24. And that's the quickest way to get, so just replacing the first stage, we're going to continue to fly the same second stage fairing and avionics and so forth. And we think that's the quickest way to get launches back here to Virginia and start flying these CRS missions back here in Virginia with the
You're talking about also the medium lift vehicle after that. So how long will you be using the 330 configuration?
Yep, good question. We're planning on 3 flights at least. And then we would, so after we develop that first stage, like I mentioned, that's the quickest way to get flying back here with that configuration. We would then embark on a second stage development with Firefly and a larger fairing, and we're calling that the medium launch vehicle right now. We've got a naming contest internal to the company, and we're looking for really good names from our employees. I'm sure they're going to come up with them, but that is slated for late 2025 debut of what we're calling just the medium launch vehicle right now. We're really excited about it. It's going to have, having a liquid first and a liquid second is going to give us more capability to higher altitudes. It's going to allow us to have more precise orbit injection, which is not super critical for these CRS missions because Cygnus is very capable and maneuvers around all on its own plenty well. But for some of the other satellite launch type missions, we require to have a more precise injection than we can get with a solid stage as the last stage of the rocket.
Thank you. We'll now go to the phone. We'll take a question from Marcia Smith from Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much for taking my question. I don't know if this is for Joel or Heidi, but it has to do with the status of the JEDI experiment. I gather that there's either a proposal or an agreement to extend how long that's going to be up there. Could you sort of give us an update on that? And more broadly, how are you doing in terms of people wanting to put their experiments up on ISS? Are you getting into a crunch because there are so many customers, spots for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can take that. As I mentioned earlier, this is a very exciting time for research, and part of that is because we do have so many different investigators and so many different entities that want to take advantage of using the International Space Station. One of the unique aspects of the ISS, in addition to the sustained microgravity environment and the exposure to the unique environment in space, is that we also have a platform that allows us to see both down onto the Earth as well as up into space. We have a suite of investigations on board that are currently looking down and studying how the Earth's ecosystem is changing. I think there are about 7 on orbit right now. And they're doing it in different ways. But the interesting thing is that the nature of these observations is very complementary. And so even though the investigators are taking data for their primary purpose, they're able to see how changes in one area will impact changes in another area. So it gives us a really great opportunity to see the interdependencies and how the Earth is changing overall. So I would say every investigation comes in with an expected lifetime, and that is the expected lifetime they need to complete their primary science objectives. Sometimes science investigations request to stay longer, and as long as there's no impact with other investigations that are currently on orbit, usually that's able to be accommodated. But in all cases, those requests are reviewed to make sure that all of our science sponsors who want to send up research are given the opportunity within the bounds that are allowed. So in terms of the JEDI investigation, the requests that come in are reviewed by the right folks within NASA, and that includes boards that include all of our different science sponsors to make sure everybody is able to get the science that they need without impacting other investigations.
Great, thank you. We'll now take a question from social media.
Retraction Podcast. Is it on? We're good? Cool. Retraction Podcast from Twitter asks, will the plants being grown in PH03 inform the viability of growing all plants in space or only those related to the plants used in the experiment?
Okay, I can take that one too. So Plant Habitat 03 is studying what we call a model organism plant. So this is a plant that has characteristics that are very indicative of other plants. So studying this one plant can tell us a lot about how other plants work as well. So in that way, the studies that we do on Plant Habitat 03 will have some ability to inform the growth of all different plant species.
Great, thank you. Gentleman in the back, please, in the room.
Two questions. First one, Peter Coles, WCPC. Northrop Grumman, Cygnus is known for its duration. How long is it going to be on orbit after it leaves the ISS? And what post-ISS missions does it have? And for Mars, with the increase of busyness in the spaceport, what are you guys looking forward to in the next couple of years with the new clients coming on, the new public partnerships and private partnerships coming on?
Yeah, maybe I'll take the first one. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because as I mentioned during the intro, we have really optimized the cargo and fuel load. There really won't be any secondary missions. So after we load up the trash complement, we'll really just linger a little bit, then do the reentry sequence and control burn thereafter. Over to you.
All right, thank you. And in terms of Mars, we're looking for what appears to be exponential growth in the next 3 to 5 years of launch activity in our manifest out of Mars. We're growing that quickly. We expect to see that growth begin to uptick significantly as recently as next year, 2023.
Alan Williams with ZOG 43. A couple of questions about the launch itself tomorrow. Assuming good visibility, do we have any idea whether or not the plume from the first stage is going to be visible at all as it's going downrange and starts being hit by the sun? And second, could we expect to have any kind of fluorescence from the solid propellants on the second stage?
Yes, I think the timing is it could be really good for those kind of effects, yes, and the solid rocket motor plume does have some aluminum particulate in it that can really reflect the light. So yeah, it could happen. Hopefully we'll get some really great conditions tomorrow and see that kind of effect. Yep, we'll be right before sunrise.
Thank you. We'll now take another question from social media.
Steve Hammer from Facebook asks, will Cygnus be used to boost the orbit of the ISS?
The answer is yes. Our plan is we have the capability for this vehicle, and so we'd like to use it to reboost like we did with the last Cygnus spacecraft. Our plan going forward to have that capability on all the Cygnus spacecraft and complement the on-orbit partnership with a reboost capability.
Gentleman in the back, please.
Scott Holmes from newsplusnotes.com. And before I came here, one of our younger readers asked me to ask this question. His name is Logan, and since he's underage, I'm not going to go any farther than that. But he wanted to know what the advantages were of resupplying the space station from Virginia as opposed to Florida.
I can start, and then I'll hand it over to you guys. Good question, Logan. Thank you for paying attention to our space program. One of the coolest things about Wallops is you're generally always number one on the runway. And so we love coming out of Wallops. Working with Virginia Space, the Northrop team, and the Wallops team here is just an awesome partnership. And then to come here, they take great care of us. They take great care of the supplies we bring to the International Space Station. We're able to use the community. We use the community to fly fresh fruit. And so we're flying some fresh fruit on this vehicle that's coming from this community. It's just an awesome partnership that we have. And so from my standpoint, number one on the runway is always a cool thing.
Yeah, and Logan, this is Kurt. I'll talk about some analysis we did on deciding where to launch this rocket to get to the space station. And the space station is in a circular orbit around the Earth. In an orbit plane, it's inclined 51.6 degrees to the equator. So if you can imagine that, it's going around the Earth, kind of at an angle to the equator. And so back in, I think it was 2008, we did a bunch of analysis. We were able to do these simulations with computers that model how the rocket is going to fly through the air. And so we did some comparisons from launching from Florida versus launching from Virginia. And we found that you could get the same amount of performance from Wallops as you would get from Florida to that orbit plane of 51 degrees inclination to get to the space station. So in terms of performance of the station, it doesn't really matter whether you launch from Virginia or from Florida.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing. There's also a pizza truck with the pizza named after the Antares launch vehicle, so we have a lot of support locally.
Great, thank you.
That's a good point.
Let's go to the gentleman there in the middle, please.
Yeah, this is J.D. Taylor with USA in Space for Northrop Grumman. At some point in the future, are you all looking at trying to do reuse of rockets such as what SpaceX does?
Yes, this first stage that I commented on, that's going to be the first stage for the A330, and then it's going to be the first stage for the later medium launcher. It has a 7-engine configuration, and so it will have a single center engine, and so that configuration is compatible with the relanding, where, you know, after you burn the first stage and you come back to land, the stage is very light comparatively, and so you really want to be able to light one single engine and have that steer you down to a propulsive landing. And so yes, we are thinking about that, and we're building in the capability to do reuse later in that development. We'll start out just, you know, with a expendable version, and then we'll bring in the reuse later is the plan.
We'll take another question from social media.
In response to the viewing map of the eastern seaboard, Paul from Twitter asks, which direction should one be looking?
You'd be generally looking southeast. So, you know, we launch on a southeast azimuth to get to that 51-degree inclination orbit plane.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I have a question for Kurt. If for some reason we can't launch tomorrow, what are the next or future opportunities?
Yes, okay, so I mentioned we have a 5-minute window, so the optimal launch time to get into that orbit plane, which is precessing over top of Wallops, when it gets over top of it, that's where we want to launch, is right into that plane. So we've allocated plus or minus 2.5 minutes for that, and we have enough performance on the rocket to accommodate that 2.5 minute difference from the optimal launch time, and so that just gives us some wiggle room in terms of scheduling the actual liftoff time. If we can't go today, then we have an opportunity tomorrow. The way the orbit precesses around, it'll be 23.5 hours later. So it won't quite be 24 hours later. It'll be a little bit earlier tomorrow. So we'll get even less sleep if we delay 24 hours. And so I'll mention that, so 24 hours later is no cargo refresh, is my understanding, but if we can't go the first and the second day, then we would stand down and we would refresh the cargo and then go for a later date.
Great, thank you. There are no questions in the room at the moment. I'll just remind folks on the phone line, please use *1 if you'd like to get into the queue to ask a question. And I think we'll go to social media next. Thank you.
Mandelbrot on Twitter asks, why are we launching satellites for Japan, Uganda, and Zimbabwe?
That's a great question. So the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, they have a program called the BIRDS program. This is the 5th one of those missions. And the goal of this program is to help non-spacefaring nations to get their first step into spaceflight and really use that as a starting point to build upon. So it's a great program, and these students that are working on these satellites are extremely excited, and it's just a great way to get them involved in spaceflight.
Great, thanks. I think we have one more question in the room.
Good afternoon, Jim Jenkins from Richmond, Virginia. This question is for Heidi, and it's mainly for the Red Wire team. How will it be possible to accomplish all the components related to cellular metabolism as you 3D print cellular tissue, not just in general, but especially in zero gravity?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I can give you a partial answer, and I would say you can also follow up with the Red Wire team afterwards. I know they're here as well. So there are a lot of components that are involved in biofabrication, which is what the biofabrication facility is looking at. So in addition to cartilage, they need cells, they need blood vessels, they need lots of different systems to interact correctly. And so part of the purpose of the biofabrication facility is to see how they can get all of those components to interact in a way that it can stand up to the effects of gravity when those tissues are returned from space. So I look at biofabrication facility as a stepping stone to help us understand what we know and what we don't know and what we need to figure out in order to make this a viable option for being able to bioprint human tissues and human organs down the line.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And I have one for Jeff. How have you gotten the word out to people to ensure boats and planes don't interrupt the launch?
I'm sorry, say that again.
That's a great question.
I didn't.
Okay, how have you gotten the word out to people to ensure boats and planes don't interrupt the launch?
Oh yes, we orchestrate. We've got surveillance assets that both for surface vessels and vessels or airplanes. We work with the FAA to close off the corridor that runs right through Wallops. Actually, we have a Victor Airway that runs right past Wallops. It's like the I-95 in the air that goes north and south. So we have to work with the FAA to clear those areas. So we've got those reservations in for that clearance. And from a surface area, we put in vacates. The Navy controls the ops areas out in the ocean, so we have to reserve space out in the ocean for that. And so we reserve ops areas, but the closer in areas, we actually put boats out there. We work with the Coast Guard. We work with the Virginia Marine Police. We work with local Chincoteague boaters to go to areas that kind of outlie or hazard areas to have boaters that may be potentially hitting those areas to tell them to warn them to go around our area. So we work with a lot of local boaters, the government, with the Coast Guard and many of the Navy and the FAA. So a lot of coordination goes on to surveil the area around Wallops, because the number one goal for NASA is to launch, safely without protecting people and property. So that's the number one goal, and we put a lot of time and a lot of effort into that coordination.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we'll go to social media, and I think this will be our last question.
Bob Fullerton from Facebook asks, are fog or winds a concern for tomorrow?
Fog or winds?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, from the weather report, we are a little concerned with the fog in the morning. With the change in the seasons, we have a lot of low-lying clouds and a lot of fog. So indeed we are. We show an 80% chance of being able to launch. At 20% that we show as a potential violation is indeed the low clouds and the fog. So the wind, not a problem. We actually want the winds to come in to try to blow the fog out, but no winds are a concern.
Great, thank you. And thank you once again to all of our panelists, Joel Montalbano, Heidi Paris, Steve Krein, Kurt Eberly, Ted Mercer, and Jeff Reddish for taking time out of your busy pre-launch schedules to talk to us about this important mission. Thank you to the media and our viewers for your interest in this mission and the important science, research, and technology demonstrations that it will enable aboard the space station. NASA TV coverage begins tomorrow, Sunday, November 6th, at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for liftoff at 5:50 a.m. Stay tuned to nasa.gov/Northrop Grumman for launch updates. If you're in the local area and hoping to see the launch, note that the Wallops Visitor Center will open at 3:30 a.m. Viewers in the Mid-Atlantic also may have an opportunity to see it depending on their location and the weather. And don't forget to set your clocks back 1 hour. Go Antares, go Cygnus, go science. Thank you.